Brought to you by MediaTek. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Jouar, and today is Thursday, February 1st, 2024. And I've got Finbarr Moynihan here of MediaTek. Finbarr, welcome yet again to the podcast. Love to have you on.
Thanks, Miriam. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you as well. I want to chat with you today specifically about the Dimensity 8300, big new exciting product, but mostly, in context with the 9300, because it's kind of hard to get a feel for things since we haven't had a device in hand yet. But also, CES went by about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. I was there. There was some major announcements, but what struck me the most in terms of MediaTek news was Rabbit and the Helio-based, what do they call it? Like a companion. And, I love it when we see something unusual come out that uses a chipset that we're kind of all familiar with. So let's talk about 8300. What should we know about 8300?
So the Dimensity 8300 we launched, I think, it's a couple of weeks ago now, end of the year last year. And it's part of our, premium series, our Dimensity 8000 series, which, as you know, and as you pointed out, sort of sits below our flagship tier, right? So the 9000 is our flagship tier. Of course, we launched the Dimensity 9300 back in November. And then a little bit later, we launched the Dimensity 8300. And this segment has been a very important segment for us over the last couple of years. And I think we sort of created this segment, right? We call it premium. Others maybe refer to it as sub-flagship. But in a sense, what we're trying to do with the Dimensity 8300 is bring a really premium experience, leveraging as much technology as we can from the flagship. Of course, price points being different, we can't put everything that's in the flagship, otherwise it would be a flagship chip, right? But selectively, I would say in certain areas, we try to bring as much of that technology from the flagship architecture as we can into this tier. Stay on the leading process technologies, bring a really high-end experience, premium experience to the consumers. And that formula has proven quite successful by delivering what I would call optimized chipsets for this segment, right? We, of course, see some cascading of the previous generation flagships down as well. So it's a delicate balance, I think, between, what's the right price performance to put into that segment. And I think we've made some significant upgrades with the Dimensity 8300 from the previous generation, the Dimensity 8200 the year before.
Can you walk us through quickly, like 2 or 3 of those upgrades? I think it's a better chip size, right, as well?
Yeah, I think
Fab.
Probably the few areas, yes, exactly. So we moved to the second generation of TSMC's 4-nanometer process technology. We've upgraded the CPU cluster to an ARM v9 cluster, which brings about a 20% performance lift in computing power, and at the same time, coupling the CPU architecture, the ARM v9 cores, the process technology, and the new memory interfaces, about a 30% power reduction at the same performance level, if you want to think of it that way. So 20% performance, 30% reduction in power. I would say the 2 other areas where we've made some significant progress is on the AI acceleration side. So very exciting, of course, AI, and of course now the emergence of generative AI. And we've talked a lot about that with the flagship last year in the Dimensity 9300.
Right.
We have leveraged essentially the same AI acceleration architecture, what we call our APU, into the 8300. The performance is, of course, going to be a little bit scaled back from the flagship, but relative to the Dimensity 8200, we're offering about 3.3 times performance for traditional AI. But maybe more headline grabbing or more exciting is we're also building in capability in this tier as well as the flagship for on-chip generative AI acceleration. And with this Dimensity 8300 product, we're supporting up to 10 billion parameter models for large language models. So again, this is going to allow, as we go into this year, 2024, our customers to deliver, unique experiences based on Gen AI technology for both the flagship tier and the premium tier with both the Dimensity 9300 and the Dimensity 8300. And probably
nice.
The third area then is the camera, where we've also leveraged similar ISP technology as the flagship to bring really good, 14-bit high dynamic range ISR, dual camera ISPs, high performance, low power 4K video and video encoding and recording. So there's other areas, of course, but I would say the CPU, the APU, and the camera are probably the three areas where we've really made a big investment in this new product.
So Finbarr, the next question is, have we seen any 8300 devices yet that have been announced? Because so many phones have been announced in the last month because everything shifted early that personally I've even lost track. So fill us in on what you know there.
Yeah, it kind of is the busy season, all right, so it's understandable. Yes, so Redmi launched a model called the K70E.
Okay,
they launched
that's right.
That, I think, late November, early December. I can't remember exactly the date, but towards the end of last year. So that was the first model to launch with the new Dimensity 8300. And there will be more coming as we go through, the next couple of months here.
It's funny because I actually remember now, you just jogged my memory covering this on the podcast at the end of November or early December, or probably actually a little later than that, probably like late December because this chip did not come out till late last year. But I remember this E model going like, okay, they're doing a MediaTek chip and 8300 it is. So that's exciting. Obviously, you anticipate more coming, I presume, because this is a very price sensitive tier, which is very popular in China, right?
Yeah. And also, I think with some of the OEMs for their overseas models as well, because it sort of hits that sweet spot of performance price that sort of is a good place for some of those regions, whether it's India, Southeast Asia, Europe, as they expand out of China.
Yeah, absolutely. So without talking specifically prices here, but I'm kind of curious, you're phone OEM, right? And you're looking at making a higher tier device and you're looking at, okay, should I get a Dimensity 9300 and 8300? What does that translate into a difference in terms of pure like end price difference? Like obviously you're including something, it feels like 90 or 80% of what the 9300 can do, but you're obviously doing it in such a way that it's more accessible and affordable, right? I've always kind of wondered, and since you are, the guru of all things chipsets, I thought maybe you can enlighten my audience a little bit, because I think one of the things we have a hard time understanding with all these tiers is like, clearly, manufacturers pick their chips based on an overall BOM, right? Bill of materials. Of course, they're going to tune down the display and the cameras a little bit from a flagship. So overall, you get a reduction in cost. But I'm kind of wondering, how significant is the reduction in cost, roughly, percentage-wise, maybe on going from 8 to a 7 or 9 to an 8? Is there something there? Is it really dependent on the deal you have with the manufacturer? Like, is there too many variables?
There are a lot of variables, of course. And as you point out, I mean, a lot of the decisions rest with the OEMs in terms of what they want to do with cameras, displays, the amount of memory on chip, the other big cost factors that drive the bill of materials cost, if you like. But I would point out, to some degree, defining the Dimensity 9 series is relatively straightforward. I don't want to belittle the hard work that my colleagues in headquarters in the product marketing and the engineering side do, but to some degree, flagship is all about just delivering the best that you possibly can, right? The, absolute latest process technology, the absolute latest CPU cores, the absolute latest GPU cores, performance. Obviously, the 8000 series is much more of a balancing act, but I will point out a few areas where there are some significant differences. For example, with the Dimensity 9300, last year, you may recall, we went for what we called an all big core CPU architecture.
Right.
We had 4 of the Cortex X4 cores and then 4 of the Cortex A715 cores. With the 8300, we actually don't have any of the Cortex X cores. So we're going for a Cortex A7 plus a Cortex A5 configuration, kind of 1 plus 3 plus 4 cores. Still gives excellent performance, but of course there's some silicon cost savings by not using the Cortex X series. The other big area, I would say, where the silicon area and therefore the cost of the chipset is probably impacted is on the GPU side, right? So again, just to give you a comparison, Dimensity 9300 has an 11-core Immortalis ARM GPU core. the Dimensity 8300 has excellent GPU capability, but it's got a 6-core,
Right.
Mali G615. So again, that translates into some significant silicon cost area. And then as you look at the other areas, I touched on some of them, right? So, the APU, the ISP, the display will use a lot of the same architecture, but we may scale back some of the features and save some silicon area for the 8300 series. So I would say there's, it's a significant enough difference in the chipset cost and the chipset pricing that really allows our customers to kind of differentiate those products at a different price point and a different tier of the market, right? So the the 9000 series, of course, goes into their flagship models. These models tend to sit a little bit below that. So, with all of those changes that I was talking about, there's some significant cost savings in the silicon area, which of course translates into some, reduced price for the 8300 compared to the Dimensity 9300. And when you couple that with some of the decisions that the OEMs make, like I said, about memory, display, camera, etc., it really allows them, I think, to position these Dimensity 8300 models at a different segment and a different price point than the flagship tiers, which of course go into their higher priced models.
So for you, MediaTek, is it mostly a cost of the real estate on the silicon, or is it also you're trying to, obviously you have this huge R&D investment every time you make a 9300, and you're leveraging that to some extent by making the 8300 and trickling it down next year to the 7400 or whatever it might be. How, as a manufacturer, is it purely area, or is there another big, is the lithography expensive as well, or in the process? I'm kind of curious because, we never talk about these things.
I think there's a lot of leverage in the technology, as you can imagine, right? So we're using similar IP, similar architectures between the two products, as I mentioned. Of course, there's additional engineering effort to scale those down, to redefine the product, to actually design the whole system. And again, when we're talking about these large SoCs in, advanced CMOS process at TSMC, like 4 nanometer and going in, it's not a trivial task. So
yeah, for sure.
There's certainly a significant amount of engineering, but, I think we do benefit from having done the work, in the flagship tier. And if you kind of compare some of the architectures and some of the specs from the Dimensity 9300 and even looking back to last year's Dimensity 9200, you'll see some similarities. So, for example, the Dimensity 8300 uses an LPDDR5X memory interface that's exactly the same as what we had on the Dimensity 9200 last year. So, between this year's flagship, last year's flagship, that gives us some leverage. But again, there's still work to do to tape out the whole system and the whole SoC.
And with all the, essentially subsystems in the SoC, looking at 9300, you got everything at 100%, right? You basically the best that MediaTek can do. Do you feel that because of the demand of the manufacturer and us end consumers, people listening to the podcast right now, for example, imaging is super critical. So I presume that when you dial that down, you dial it down a little less than maybe CPU or display support, or maybe AI is dialed close to max as well because it's becoming so critical. Walk us through this kind of the shape of the EQ, as it were, how you balance out all these parts as you create a, upper mid-tier chipset like the 8300.
I think you nailed it, Miriam. I think for this particular one, and I think this is, kind of what's indicative of the industry, exactly that. The camera, the AI capability are, dialed down a little bit, but really kind of trying to deliver as much or as close to the flagship as we can. As I mentioned, we certainly scaled back the CPU capability, none of the Cortex X cores. We certainly scaled back the silicon commitment to graphics and GPU. Again, still obviously delivering a good gaming performance, but not the same level as the flagship tier.
Makes sense.
Some other areas, where we've probably optimized, for the flagship tier, the Dimensity 9300, we deliver a full external Wi-Fi combo chip, which supports Wi-Fi 7. Whereas here with the Dimensity 8300, we've gone for an integrated approach where we support Wi-Fi 6E integrated. And then, of course, there's some cost savings to that as well. and then maybe scaling back on some of the 5G capability. So this doesn't
Of
support
course.
millimeter wave. It's a sub-6 optimized modem, etc. You put all that together, it really can make a significant difference and allow us to create a separate tier of products with the 8000 series, and particularly this new Dimensity 8300.
And so one of the advantages of the 8300, then, it is a complete singles chip solution. I mean, you get the benefits of the efficiencies power-wise related to that. So on the 9300, is just Wi-Fi separate, 5G built in and Bluetooth built in, or how does it work?
So typically the way we architect at the flagship is the baseband of the 5G is built into all of our SoCs. Of course, there's an external RF components for the transceiver.
Of course.
And then for Wi-Fi, what we typically do is we build a Wi-Fi plus Bluetooth combo chip for the flagship tier. So that, in the case of both the 9200 and this year's 9300, that supports a separate chip with, Wi-Fi 7, the latest Bluetooth standard. Whereas for the 8300, we do the same as we do on 5G. The baseband part is integrated into the SoC, and then there's an external RF for the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth. So from an overall bill of materials, it obviously has some cost savings and some advantages as well. But it also allows us then at the flagship tier to deliver the absolute best Wi-Fi performance and the latest standard and the latest spec there.
How many more generations do you think before you can integrate the Wi-Fi 7 as we know it today into any chipset, say from the 7000 up?
I think, Wi-Fi 7 has obviously kicked off, right? You mentioned CES at the start of the discussion, right? And we obviously saw the Wi-Fi Alliance announce the, certification and the Wi-Fi 7. So now we're officially in the Wi-Fi 7 era, even though we've been talking about it for probably 2 years. So I think you're going to see, obviously Wi-Fi 7 become more and more pervasive. I mean, late last year, I think around the time of our summit, we announced, 2 new Wi-Fi 7 products, sort of bringing Wi-Fi 7 for the access point and for the client devices like TV, smart home, PC, notebook, etc., into kind of more of a mid-range segment. So I think it's inevitable that, we're going to see Wi-Fi 7 capability cascading down the tiers of mobile. So I don't, we're not announcing any plans, but I think it's inevitable that it's going to start making its way into the 8000 series next, and then eventually the 7000 series and on down.
Fantastic. Last thing before we wrap up, CES, what stood out for you? It doesn't matter what it is, even if it's not MediaTek related, but I thought perhaps you had some thoughts on Rabbit, which is a very unusual product and does integrate a Helio chipset from MediaTek.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was one of the interesting areas for me at CES was there was certainly a lot of talk about AI and how AI is going to get deployed, right? A lot of discussion about AI in the PC space, which I think was interesting. And I think it's, we're already seeing some of the useful enterprise use cases that AI is going to enable. And I think that's kind of an exciting thing, for the industry as a whole, because I think it's going to help flush out what are those useful AI use cases. I mean, when we look at mobile, obviously we've built capability for AI acceleration inference at the edge into the 9300 and the Dimensity 8300 that we've been talking about. And we're going to see customers doing interesting things, both in terms of productivity use cases and maybe, social and entertainment kind of use cases. And my feeling is I think 2024 is going to sort of flush out what consumers really see value in and what's going to be useful. I think these new categories of devices that you mentioned, like Rabbit, are also exciting because I think, I personally think Gen AI has this magical feel about it. And therefore, I think, it sparks the imagination to see how people are going to interact with it and how it's going to be useful. So I'm excited to see some of these new device architectures, these device interfaces sort of becoming available. And, again, I think we're, obviously the Rabbit device got a lot of attention. It's a pretty cool device. So we'll see how that goes. And I suppose the other kind of things that stood out for me at CES, we already mentioned, of course, the Wi-Fi 7 era, and that's exciting news for that ecosystem and all those devices now becoming available. And I think automotive was the other area where there was a lot of, CES has become more and more central as a I wouldn't say an automotive show, but an automotive tech show where like a lot of the in-cabin tech is demonstrated and shown. We were doing some of the same at our booth. But there was, I think, a lot of interesting things being shown by chipset suppliers, OEMs, tier ones, car makers, etc. That sort of feels to me like we've made a lot of progress over the last year, and that was kind of exciting. And maybe the last one, there was a lot of XR and AR glass and sort of technology being demonstrated there as well. So that seemed to be another relatively vibrant area from what I saw, at least. Maybe you had some thoughts as well.
I agree, absolutely. Definitely those areas for me hit it hard. Always excited to see new devices, hence Rabbit. Automotive, I cover extensively. XR and AR is, obviously clearly seeing a bit of a new excitement due to the, the Apple phenomenon, as it were. But listen, we got to wrap up, Finbarr. Thanks so much for your insights on CES and the future, but also, to walk us through some of the more kind of like inside baseball on the chipset, because I think my audience is always excited to see a new chip, but at the same time, it's like, how does this really work? And I'm glad you didn't mind answering my questions about that. So thanks again for being on the show, and we'll definitely have you on at some point in the future. And folks, let's carry on with the rest of the show. Thanks, Finbarr.
Thanks, Marian. Always a pleasure chatting.
And I'm back with Parker. How are you doing, Parker?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty damn great, frankly. I want to leave all this MediaTek stuff behind for a minute and talk about like this Vision Pro madness. It's Vision Pro week. What are your thoughts initially?
Vision Pro for me specifically is very interesting because people know me as an Android guy. And so Apple stuff is a whole other subject. But of course, being somebody who's just generally interested in tech, new stuff is always cool.
I mean, you can't dismiss it, right? Like, even if you're like, I think even if you're like an Oculus or Quest person, you got to look at this thing and go like, okay, what's the deal here, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I haven't, obviously, it's brand new. I haven't had a chance to use it, but I've seen the reviews. I've seen what people think. I think there's a lot of positives, and I think there's also some negatives for sure. Like, I mean, people are saying that it's kind of mind-blowing the first time you use it. All of the spatial computing or whatever they're calling it is just, better than what anyone's seen before with other headsets. But I've also heard people saying it's not perfect, and we don't really know how high the ceiling is as far as mixed reality goes with these type of devices that you put on your face.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Parker, can I ask you to center yourself on the video a little more? Because the way Skype is going to record this, you might get cut off because it's going to put us side by side.
Okay.
Yeah, so there you go. Like, be in the middle of your video, basically, as much as you can. You're good right now. That's
Sweet.
Perfect. Awesome.
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, I feel the same way. Like, I think that for me, as a tech nerd, I need to look at this, right? I also happen to be a big Mac person. Big Mac, haha. But like I have used the Mac for a long time. I have a Mac. I'm recording this on a Mac. I have an iPhone simply to do my videos, my video content. But I'm not an iPhone user. You know that. And for those of you who don't know Parker Burton, he's like one of the best TikTokers in the universe, in my opinion. So we'll get it's true. We'll get a chance for you to tell people where they can find you at the end of the show. But I think like for me personally, it's like I need to look at it, but I have a very fraught history with VR. Like, and I hate to say this, but to me, this is VR, even though it does, pass through and all that stuff. Like, the way I see it is like it's VR, and you can't just get out of that storyline. So, I think for me, what is exciting here is that I was going into it kind of negative because of my bad VR experiences, and now I'm reading some reviews of people I trust and know and have worked with. And I'm like, okay, like, and they are not going to sugarcoat it, right? Like Neela at The Verge, used to be my boss for a while when I was at Engadget. Joanna and I worked together. She's from the Wall Street Journal. Lance Ulanoff, who's my editor at Tech Radar. I write car content for them, EV tech car stuff. And, these are people who have been covering tech for over a decade each, like me. And so we're all kind of like, know that, it's when you're kind of part of the Apple review program, it's a little tricky. Like I've been to the mothership. Not the new one. I've Infinite Loop back in the day, but I've been, invited. I've gotten my review units under embargo, and you pretty much have to kind of sign your life away with a phone book size stack of NDAs. For example, things that I remember from back in the day. They wouldn't let anyone else on the team review the product, which is why, normally Adi Robertson at The Verge is the VR person. But you notice Nilay reviewed it and it's mentioned in his review that Adi was kind of like, he was consulting with her about stuff because they're super strict about who gets to write the review and use the product.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of went into it going like with how much Apple was controlling stuff, like, not letting them take pictures during these briefings. I'm like, this is going to be worse than the experiences that I've had and that I know every journalist has with Apple. But then I saw Nilay's review and I'm like, okay, like he's not sugarcoating it. And, he's got the leverage of The Verge, right? Like what they're going to do is ban The Verge. Like, come on. Right. At the same time, I read other people's like, Ray Wong, he like when he was eating his lunch yesterday while wearing the Vision Pro, like there's, he's the one who discovered that the cable from the battery pack is detachable and has this modified lightning connector on it, right?
Yeah, I saw that.
So my point is like, you look at their content and you're like, okay, so there's some interesting things here. Would I go out and buy one? Absolutely not. Like I'll tell you in a minute because I want to hear your thoughts about your history with VR before I tell you mine, but I have a lot of issues with VR, not because I don't think it's a good thing, but because I wear glasses like you. And it's always been an absolutely terrible experience. And I don't think Apple can solve that. And I'm not about to spend $3,500 to find out if they can. And I know I can demo it at the store, and maybe I will, but it's more like, I'm much more of a believer of AR than VR, and I'm a believer of what Meta Ray-Ban is doing in terms of form factor. I understand the tech isn't there yet, but that's kind of where I want it to be. And right now, the fact that they're not able to do that, and because of that, they're making a VR headset that has pass-through, to me, it's very much a compromise. And I understand the technical reasons they did it, but I'm like, that's not the world I want to play in. I'd rather wait for 5 years for this to develop into something that looks more like X-Rail glasses. And then I might jump in. So what's your thoughts on the whole VR, AR, MR, XR, blah, blah, blah. They call it reality computing or whatever. Ugh.
Right. Yeah. I feel like I'm in a similar boat. I mean, if we go back to I remember specifically my first ever experience with VR. And I think it was actually when Samsung had what did they call it? It was like where you put the phone in the little VR headset.
The Galaxy Gear?
Yes, Galaxy Gear VR. Yes, that was my first ever experience with VR. And I actually tried it at a Best Buy. And at the time, I didn't really know much about VR, never really tried it. I just saw they had a demo and I was like, oh, let me try this out.
I'll try that.
And at the time, I was actually mind blown. I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And like I had a couple friends with me, like and I went and got them and I'm like, you guys have to try this. This is like the coolest thing ever. But then you try it and you use it for a little bit and then it kind of just like gets old. I don't know if that's the way to put it. It's like one of those things that's really cool at first, but like, are you actually going to use it in your like everyday life?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, even people who have like the Oculus or the Meta Quest, I feel like, is that something they're using every single day? Maybe for a very small amount of people.
To work out or something like Beat Saber or something, I get that.
Yeah. But like as something that you're going to like I can't really imagine personally a future where you walk into your office job at work and everyone sits down at their cubicle and just puts on their big old headset and then just gets their work done. Like maybe that is the future, but I can't see it. I don't know. But like you said, AR with like glasses, like X-Rail glasses, or, maybe Meta will make glasses like that. I think that is closer to what I can visualize as the actual future as far as this whole AR VR space goes, because I feel like the VR putting on the headset just really takes you away of your real world. I mean, of course they're doing the camera pass through, which is great. And I've heard great things about it, but I don't know. I just don't think it's the same.
It's absolutely not the same. And it's already been written about by others, like how there is, obviously it's a lower resolution experience. There is, some distortion and stuff. And yes, your brain will compensate really quickly. But at the same time, you're getting a lo-fi version of reality. And to me, the whole point of AR is to augment my reality, not make it worse, right? Like I get that we're not there technically, but I feel like, in that sense, I look back at Google Glass, which I spent $1,500 of my own money for back in the day. And I loved it. The only reason it failed is because the initial reaction from the public out there was really negative, and people got kicked out of restaurants and bars and coffee shops for wearing it because they were being jerks. They were recording people. There was no recording light. Like Google made some strategic mistakes, but in terms of the hardware, it was the same 2-hour battery life, not very useful.
Yeah.
You wouldn't wear it all day, but when you did wear it, even though it was just a tiny little monochrome display in the corner of your right eye, it was great. It was great because it wasn't in your face. It was just on your side of your face. It was just kind of there. You forgot about it. And then you would pop something up. You'd be like, oh, cool. I just got an email from my boss. I should probably get that work done. Like, whatever, right? Like you didn't feel like it was invading your world. And you look at the hardware today, it's still super small and sleek, right? And imagine if that hadn't failed. Imagine if that had continued for a decade. We would have that built into Meta glasses now for sure. Ray-Ban style, right? And to me, the fact that it worked with my glasses, I could just put it on top. It wasn't a big deal. It was always in focus. It worked because my glasses are great. So this is the thing that's missing here. And I'm just really kind of bummed out that a few bad actors ruined Google Glass for us and Google abandoned it, because where would we be now, right? It starts with a little monochrome display in the corner, but then maybe the next gen it's slimmer and the display is color. And then the next version, the color of view, the field of view is wider. Then maybe they put one on each side, and then now you get stereo view and stuff. And like, I understand that there's some things you can do with Vision Pro that are not AR things, that are absolutely probably amazing, probably better than anyone has ever done with those incredible micro LED displays that they have in there. I think that, watching a movie in 3D or even just in 2D is going to be mind blowing on that thing. And that to me that's not AR, that's not MR, that's just VR. Like you're virtual theater, right? And I don't want to pen that, but that's not what I think about when I think about a device that I wear to assist my life, right? Like I'd rather you have a separate device that just does that. Like that just is just a virtual giant screen. I put it on and when I'm by myself. But when I'm with friends, I'm going to watch on a projector or a big screen TV because there's that social engagement thing, right? And then I think the other thing that Apple made potentially a mistake with is the eyesight, they call it, the fact that it shows your face. Like I get what they were trying to do there, but who's realistically going to interact with their family or their kids like they see in the ads with this thing on? Like you could save $1,000 by not having that display and all the complication it brings. And then that terrible, scanning of your face so that you can be in a virtual, FaceTime call. You saw those avatars. They're so bad. And look, I drive a Tesla. I understand all about beta software. I've been there since day one on the Model 3. I pre-ordered it. It's my second Model 3. I know I've seen beta software. I'm okay with it. But to me, this is a little too beta, like autopilot very, very early on when I first got my Model 3 in 2018, it like drove like a drunken toddler. And I was like, wow, okay, this really needs a lot of work. And now it's like pretty polished and works just fine. So like, I know it can improve, but I'm just like, you're trying to make this too complicated. Wouldn't it make more sense to just, like instead of animating you, like place a camera somewhere in your space, and just have
I actually thought about that. Yeah.
It could like if it was a good enough camera or maybe two cameras in two different spots in the room, you could like correct for angles and stuff and like kind of like how the 360 view works in a car where like if you're ever driving a car that's not a Tesla that has a 360 camera view where it stitch it to get like do that. Like maybe it'll be better, maybe it won't. But I know it doesn't solve the problem. Like when you're on an airplane, when you're,
True.
Like part of me is like laughing at my suggestion I'm about to make because it's kind of janky and Apple would never do it. But like, just having like, like a mic boom, like you have a mic boom on some gaming headphones, like a little boom with a camera that sticks out in front of you. Like that, like it wouldn't look good, but it would be a million times better in terms of what it would look like.
Even so what I would think about that is, how like the MacBook can use continuity camera. You can connect the iPhone to the MacBook. If they just did it the same way, you set your iPhone up in front of you somewhere and it just connects to the Vision Pro, and then you could have like actual FaceTime calls.
Or even just hold your freaking iPhone. You're going to have an iPhone anyway.
Or just hold it. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting, the whole avatar thing. I haven't really seen people be negative about it. I feel like everyone's like, oh, this is pretty cool.
No,
which I guess it is cool tech, but also when you're talking to somebody, I feel like it's kind of weird to just be talking to a
super uncanny, dude.
Version.
Like just look at that thing. I mean, there are some people like Marquez's avatar looked pretty good.
Yeah.
But like Joanna has like poofy cheeks, Eli's hair is completely messed up. And come on, Eli, we all know how much his hair matters to him, and his hair is his brand. You cannot mess his hair. And even Marquez's hair doesn't look right, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like, I don't know. I feel like Apple kind of overcomplicated this. And I understand they're trying to kind of fill all the gaps so that nobody can complain that they're missing a feature or whatever, but then you have the 2-hour battery life with the external battery pack, and so forget your all-day use, although some people are plugging that into the wall. Like Joanna used it for exactly an entire day without sleeping with it. Like other than sleeping, she started at noon and ended at noon, and she had it plugged into the wall a lot while she was sitting down. But I don't know. Like, I don't want to like, I know as an engineer who's worked on product that a lot of hard work went into this. And Apple's team is absolutely at the bleeding edge of this right now. But I feel like as a product, we possibly have to go through this. Like, I don't know if you saw today, but the developer who did the Apollo Reddit app for like iPhone and Android, just relaunched his YouTube app for the Vision Pro. So we're starting to get, because, Google said we're not going to support it at launch, just like Netflix did, right? So we're starting to get third-party apps, $5 in the Vision Pro store. And it's like, I think this is great. Like, this is showing that, the developer, potential exists because it's Apple, and, Apple and developers have a fraught relationship, but definitely a long relationship, and it's been beneficial, I think, for all of us. So on one hand, like, it's expensive, battery life is bad, it's got all these weird quirks, it's heavy from what I hear too, which I think is going to be a problem. My biggest gripe with VR is that it's a prescription lens gripe. It's like, I have a very unique prescriptions, and I'm not even sure that Zeiss can custom make lenses inserts for this Vision Pro for me. I'd have to figure that out. Actually. So I always have a bad experience when I try them at like conferences and events, because I'm like, they give me like the closest thing and it's never quite right. Yeah. And then, I get hot and sweaty in there and I feel claustrophobic, not good. It's not good ventilation. It just feels heavy on my head. It's just always a bad experience. And, people are going to say, well, one day somebody's going to make it a decent experience. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't think this is Vision Pro, is it? I think that I could eat my words when I go to the Apple store and try it out sometime. But the other thing too is like, I went to CS like you did and like everyone else did. And I went to the folks at TCL invited me to their suite that they had at the MGM Grand to see all the new products. You know, their NX paper phones are really cool with the like e-ink style display, and their giant TVs and stuff. And then they had their TCL glasses there. They're just a display that you hook up to your. And we could not find a way for me to see this thing clearly and be comfortable with it. And then when I tried putting it on top of my glasses, which if you're watching this on Patreon, guys, me, my glasses are pretty big. Like, it just wasn't going to work. And I got frustrated because they just didn't understand why it was annoying to me. I'm like, because you don't have glasses. You're either wearing contacts or nothing. And to you, you don't understand the problem. But this is, to me, the number one biggest obstacle. What is it? Half the population out there is wearing glasses. Do you really, frankly, expect them to pay a premium to get a prescription for lens inserts that might or might not work right? That's only compatible with one device. Like you can't reuse those lens inserts and put them in a Quest.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in the same boat. I have glasses and I actually have a lazy eye in my left eye. So my left eye has a very strong prescription and my right eye has a fairly normal prescription. So sometimes it's very difficult for me to use these type of headsets because either, I can't use my glasses, and if I don't have my glasses on, my left eye is nearly useless. And so when it comes especially to like even using like 3D stuff that they're trying to use like with Vision Pro, and even if I go to a movie theater and they have like a 3D movie, sometimes it doesn't work super well because my left eye isn't able to see that great. So even when it comes to VR, if I can't have glasses, it definitely affects me. Even with like X-Real glasses, like I have to either just deal with it being like a little bit, it feels like it's a little bit out of focus for me, or I just put my glasses on under it and it, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but it works.
It's not a solution. Like we can't have a half-assed solution for this.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to say is like, and Apple knows that. And I'm skeptical whether they've solved the problem because prescriptions are pretty broad in range. And okay, so maybe they went from 50% of people wear glasses. I'm making that number up, but it seems like that's reasonable. And then, maybe they managed to make it work for 25%, like another 50% within that group is they're able to correct with those DICE prescriptions. But that's not a lot. Like, it's just, I don't see, like, why not to have something that's more like glasses that doesn't need some kind of complicated insert. You can, like, it's like the Ray-Ban Meta, camera glasses. It's like you can get a normal prescription in them because it's just a normal set of glasses. That's kind of what we need. Like right now, when I look at the TCL glasses or the X-Rail glasses, it's like the display is the glasses and then the inserts are the extra thing. I think it should be the other way around. I think that the optical correction should be what you see, and then somehow the display should be projected into that somehow. Like I know technically this is the challenge, right? We're not there yet. But or go direct for like a project with a laser right in the retina. That's the solution.
Just burn our retinas right to the core.
Yeah, the glass is just normal, but from the corner there's a little laser beam that just draws on your back of your eye and just says, "Here is your display of your," And I think sounds scary, but like you could probably do this eventually safely. It's just a matter of like making it work.
Right.
I mean, we watch laser projection in movie theaters all the time. Like anything that's Dolby Vision in a movie theater is laser projection onto a screen because of the high dynamic range, right? Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just I'm so torn by this because the VR is not what I want. And I know people who love their VR. They do their exercises in it, Supernatural or whatever it's called, the app, and they do their thing. And every day they spend their hour in their VR headset in the gym or whatever. And just, like that's just like, oh my God, just the thought of that is making me anxious.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I think it's cool. Obviously, like I said earlier, when there's new tech, I just love it because I love tech in general.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, like, I'm glad it exists. I think it's cool to try and use. But for me personally, I don't see myself, like, actually adopting it into, like, my daily lifestyle. I think it's like, I'll use it for, like, an hour, maybe once every couple months for fun, and then probably put it down and forget about it for a while,
Yeah. I think, it's early days. I think I want to give it the benefit of the doubt. And I think, where Apple has potentially a big advantage is that they have developers in an ecosystem. And you do need to get this in the hands of developers. Even if I only buy a Vision Pro or a Vision device from Apple 5 years from now when it's better baked and they've solved all the problems, or 10 years from now, at least there's been all that time developing apps and creating content for it. And I think that's where Apple's going to completely leapfrog Quest, Meta and stuff, because they just have, Meta has a lot of support right now, but I feel like they just, never underestimate the Apple developer community. Like, as much as I love Android, every time I use, Instagram on an iPhone, it's so much better baked, right? It's so much of a better experience. And mostly the quality of the like uploading content from an Android phone. It's not that the Android phone does a bad job at recording that content or creating that content. It's just that the app just destroys it. Like, I can take the same video file from my Pixel or Samsung and put it on an iPhone and upload to Instagram from there. And the result is just better. It's like, how is this not fixed yet?
Right.
How many Android users are out there? A lot. Like,
oh, yeah.
Man, so frustrating. So we'll see how it goes. But in the meantime, it's nice to read these reviews. It's nice to kind of get that insight and kind of live vicariously through other people. For once, it's not me doing it, I don't have to be the one worrying about being the, what's it called? The early adopter. And I can kind of sit back and go like, oh, okay, this is interesting.
Right. Yep. There it is.
You feel the same?
Yeah, I mean, you review a lot of things, and you finally get to just watch.
I know, right? Yeah. So yeah, for me, I think this is a big challenge: is that can we resolve? Even if we can, I might accept VR if they can solve the lens insert issue, the heat and weight and kind of claustrophobia, uncomfortable issue, battery life, of course, but that's gonna fix itself. It's just a matter of time.
What do you think is Apple's end goal here? Do you think this is something they're trying to, get into everyone's household to be like a normal consumer product? Or do you think it's more of a specialty, like just, developers and just people who are doing lots of work and stuff like that?
I think they see it as an iPad product right now. They kind of put it out there. At first the iPad was like, okay, this is cool. It's like a big iPhone. And eventually developers started making apps that really made it useful. A lot of music apps, a lot of like, app for people who are creating visuals using pens.
Yeah.
And kind of like drawing tools. And now it has a pretty good, especially I think the Pro products are pretty solid. And at the low end, the entry level iPad is a great content consumption device. I can totally see a parallel of Vision or Vision Pro becoming that long term as just another option, or potentially for some people the main thing, right? Yeah. But I think this, unlike the iPhone, unlike the iPad, it's going to take years to get there because of all these problems we just discussed. It's not accessible. And I'm not just talking about accessibility in terms of price. And I'm not talking about accessibility in terms of, mostly the whole concept of like, not everyone can wear this and have a good experience. And maybe I'll go to the Apple Store and be proven wrong when I demo it and they find a way to make me see this in focus without feeling, like I'm, hot and it's too heavy. Cause I do have a big head. So maybe I have a strong enough neck to hold up the thing. I don't know. My point is I could be wrong on that, but I just feel like they are having to start somewhere. And imagine yourself as Apple. You have incredible amounts of money in your bank. And what are you going to do? Right. So car is a good idea, right? Maybe car, but that seems very hard because Apple is so controlling of everything that I feel like even if they made a car, anyone they partner with, right? That's a car manufacturer, assuming they partner with someone, it's not going to be a good partnership because Apple works in a very different way than the traditional car makers. Maybe they could partner with Tesla, but again, Elon is too much of a control freak. Apple, not Tim Cook, but Apple as a company is too much of a control freak.
I think Elon's too rogue for Apple.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think it would work, right? But at the same time, doing the car from scratch like Tesla did is going to take a long time and a lot of money. So that's one avenue they can explore. But, at the core, Apple is a consumer tech company. And like, I just feel like you're probably going to have more success selling a $3,500 headset that's eventually within 5 years going to be $1,000 then you're going to have to try to enter the EV market with obviously what Apple wants is autonomy. Like I don't think they even want to let you drive. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
And so we're not there yet, right? And there's a lot of competition. Like at least with this, they only have Meta Quest to worry about, really, right?
Yeah,
and
true.
And I don't want to underestimate the team at Quest. I actually know some of the engineers there, but at the same time, like realistically, I hate to say this, but I'm pretty sure Apple can eat their lunch right now. The biggest advantage Meta has right now is that they have a headset that costs $500. That's actually really good.
Yeah.
Right?
I think definitely like right now, it's kind of like everyone who's buying the Vision Pro is just signing up to pay a crap ton of money to be a beta tester, which, I mean, Apple has so much
I did that with my Model 3. I understand,
Yeah. And Apple has a big enough of a following, of a dedicated following, that they can trust that they're actually going to get people to do that. But I don't think it'll be, if the price stays where it is, which I assume it won't, down the line, then it will never be a consumer product. If they can get it down to $1,000 and still make it really good, then I think it could be a consumer product.
Absolutely. And I think it'll get there. And if they can resolve this optics issue for those of us who really need the correction, I think I would love to see Apple in the same way as, a case for an iPhone like 7, 8, SE second gen and SE third gen is the same case. I would love to see a place where for at least 5 years, the Vision and Vision Pro products use the same inserts.
Yeah,
right?
That would be very annoying. Like if you got lenses for your Vision Pro Gen 1 and then you buy the Gen 3 and it's like, well, now you have to buy new prescription lenses for it.
And I think that's what we're going to see, because in order to evolve the product and miniaturize it, it's going to have to change. But I'd love them to get to a point where, okay, you can just use the same inserts for 2 or 3 generations.
Right.
And
definitely.
again, this is... It's a hard problem. Like, I'm not saying it's easy. Like, I'm not trying to give Apple a hard time here. I get it. But I also think it's Apple. If anybody, they can figure it out, And I would put more chips into that game than chips into the game of them making an Apple car right now. And this is me knowing EVs and the industry and driving all the cars and understanding how they're made and all the challenges around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's switch gears to some news items.
Sure.
It hasn't been too busy this week, but one of the things I'm really excited about is the Realme 12 Pro series that finally became official. I don't know how much you follow the Chinese phones and Realme in particular, but this is a $350-ish phone with pretty much the same telephoto 3x camera as on the OnePlus Open.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm very new to Chinese phones. I'm a very new content creator. I've only been doing this for about 2 years. So I've mostly dealt in US phones, but now that I've been, learning more about Chinese phones and actually getting to use them more recently. I've been exposed. I'm like, wow, there's some good stuff out there.
I know, it's pretty great.
Because I feel like in the US, if you're going to spend $300 on a phone, you're just going to expect that it's not going to be that great for the most part, unless you're getting like a special deal or something like that. But somehow these Chinese phones, they just like make them like $200 and they throw like these awesome features and specs at it. And I'm like, whoa, like how are they doing that? So, I mean, this phone, I think it starts at $310 for the 12 Pro, and you're getting an AMOLED display, 120 hertz. 1080p. With a telephoto lens. I'm like 3 years ago, an AMOLED display on a phone under $500 was unheard of. So like even that is kind of crazy.
Well, I mean, honestly, Parker, they've had AMOLED on $300 phones in China for 4 years now. It's nothing new.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to give you a bit of context, the Realme numbered series, right? Like, how there's like also the Xiaomi numbered series. The Realme numbered series has always been kind of their mid-ranger, because for a long time, Realme did not make flagships. And you can think of Realme as the new OnePlus. They're part of BBK Group, part of Oppo, OnePlus, that whole thing. Their OS is a carbon copy of ColorOS / Oxygen OS. It's called Realme UI, but it's exactly the same. You can literally look at the phones and go, parts bin, like, oh, this is the display from this OnePlus and the camera from this Oppo. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. Like, obviously, it uses super VOOC charging, 67 watt here. My point is that the Realmes have always been super aggressive in this mid-range field. Like, since the very original Realme numbered phone, that price was always around 350. They haven't gone up. Okay. You know, they've constantly delivered more than you'd expect for that price, especially in China and in India, where it's extremely competitive. In fact, Realme was created and branded that to compete with Redmi, which is Xiaomi's low-end or value brand. And because Redmi became so popular in India, BBK Group was like, yeah, we have Oppo and Vivo and OnePlus there, but we need to create a brand just to compete with Redmi that is called similar, and they called it Realme. Like,
and they did it.
It's sneaky, right?
Yeah.
So there's always a like number Pro, and then in the last 3 years or so, they've added a Pro Plus, and the Pro Plus has always been camera centric. So, you know, they've introduced things like 1 year they put a 200 megapixel in one, and it could do lossless 3x zoom because it could double crop. You know.
Right.
Then I think that was I want to say that was a 10 Pro Plus or maybe the 11 Pro Plus. I can't remember. But then, you know, they added, that's right. That was the 11 Pro Plus. I think the 10 Pro Plus had OIS and a really large sensor for the main camera, which is unheard of at the time in that price point. You know, but you look at this, right? You've seen even the Pro here, only the Pro, right? Has like 120 hertz, you know, OLED. It's got, you know, 5,000 milliamp battery. It's got, you know, Super VOOC 67 watt charging. Snapdragon 6 Gen 1. It's going to be a little janky there, but the camera, I mean, 50 megapixel OIS, no messing about. IMX 882, which is a new sensor, but it's, you know, 1/2 inch for a budget phone. That's not bad. It has a 2x telephoto, 32 megapixel. If you read between the lines and you look at the BART spin, that's a telephoto from the OnePlus 11 from last year.
Yeah.
It's a portrait lens. Okay. And then the Pro Plus, I have one right here. I should have taken it out for the Patreons. I'm sorry, guys. It's I just flew back from the Bay Area yesterday and it's still in my bag. But I have it here and that thing is crazy. You know, it's got the same main camera, I believe, but then it adds the crazy, you know, the crazy 3x/6x lossless telephoto from the OnePlus Open. It's like, what?
For $300. Well,
I'm losing my mind here, guys. And it's a 7S Gen 2 chip. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Like, that is not bad. Actually, no, I was wrong. The main sensor is a Sony IMX 890. That's the same main sensor that's, again, on the OnePlus 11 from last year.
Yeah.
Not a bad one. Of course, OIS and all that good stuff. So yeah, you get an 8 megapixel ultra wide, which is probably the generic part bin ultra wide that's been on every BBK Group phone for all of eternity at this point. But this is why I'm excited about these phones. And also, if you import this through Amazon or Ali or another, you know, importer, most of the time they'll work just fine in the US, you know, especially on T-Mobile or any network related to T-Mobile, like Mint Mobile, one of our sponsors. Look, I'm stoked about it. I'm going to try it. I haven't set it up yet. I did an unboxing video. I need to put my credentials in there and get going. I have the GT5 Pro, which was their flagship that they did, which is basically the first time, like, they haven't done too many flagships. This is the first time with the GT5 Pro that they've done a flagship that is basically competing with OnePlus 12, not 12R, competing with Oppo Find X7 non-Pro. Like, they've gone up there. I give you an example of the specs on the GT5 Pro. It's got the same main camera as the OnePlus 12. It has it's got the open telephoto as well. So it's very similar to that for the cameras, but it has 100-watt charging, 50-watt wireless charging, a metal frame instead of plastic. It's got the 4500 nits display from the OnePlus 12.
Sounds like the OnePlus 12.
It's a OnePlus 12. Basically, it's a OnePlus 12, but instead of getting that better ultra wide, the 48 megapixel ultra wide, you get an 8 megapixel ultra wide.
Okay.
And
And
the
what's
display,
the price point there?
the display's a little small. It's like 500
Okay.
in China.
All right. There
Like,
you go.
and Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, of course.
Oh,
You know,
all right.
of
For
course,
500
because, you know,
bucks. Dang.
yeah, 550, something like that. No, it's just insane, you know, and this is very typical of Realme. So I finally, this has been rumored for a while, and it's finally official. I have had it for a bit, and I couldn't talk about it, so I'm just like,
Yeah.
yes.
You know what the crazy thing to me is with the Realme 12 Pro is, so it's $310 for 128 gigs. Or if you want 256 gigs, it's $325. They only charge you $15.
$15. I know.
That's
like,
unheard
hello,
of in the
Apple.
US.
I know. Hello, Apple.
Or in the Pro Plus, it's only $25 more to go from 8 gigs of RAM to 12 gigs, plus to go from 128 to 256. I'm like, dang, they really just not overcharging.
This is why, Parker, since you're, you're still young, you probably haven't traveled a huge ton. You should go to India sometime and just do a special bunch of content on the crazy Indian phones.
Oh yeah,
because they're all like that. There's all these. There's this incredible ecosystem of mid-range phones there that you're like, oh my god, I wish it. Like here we have like Moto G, crickets. I mean, it doesn't matter what version of Moto G you pick, whether it's like the Play, which is really low end, or the higher end ones like the 5G stylus one. Crickets, okay, crickets. The closest thing we get to this stuff is with the OnePlus Nord N series.
Yeah,
and even then, it's like we get like kind of the bottom part spin barrel, like we get the IPS LCD, right? We don't get the actual like OLEDs. Although 1 year they did an OLED, the N20 had an OLED, which was only 60 hertz, but I was actually on board with that. I was like, I'd rather take an OLED at 60 hertz than an LCD at 120 or 90. I'm sorry, that's me, but
yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. All right, the next thing to kind of talk about, and I think this is between us, audience, I'm getting the devices. I can't be more specific than that. But the Xiaomi 14 series is going global. And you should probably hear more about this at MWC in Barcelona next. Well, where? We're already in February. Later this month. Okay. Just realized we're in February now.
It is.
So later this month, I'll be in Barcelona. But ultimately, the Xiaomi 14 series will be out for Europe. Right now, it's only available in China. We know that phone a little bit because we know that the Pro, for example, has titanium frame. It's a very cool looking phone with like really great cameras. So I'm excited about that. But now they've teased the launch. I think it's coming. And you know what I'd really like to see is an Ultra. Hopefully we get that. Because then we can compete with the Oppo Find X7 Pro, which I have, which I can't wait to. Actually, I have to set it up as well. I got it at the same time as the OnePlus 12, so I had to focus on my OnePlus 12 review, and I haven't had time to play with the Oppo Find X7 Pro. Yeah. So stay tuned for some content with that.
Yeah, the only Xiaomi I've ever used is the Xiaomi 12S Ultra.
Okay,
and it was cool. I didn't get to like actually switch my SIM into it, but I got to like test it out in the cameras, and I'm like, that's a cool device. It's the only time I've ever had any sort of Xiaomi in my life.
Well, it's given you a good taste because that was a really solid phone.
Yeah.
But their camera stuff is really great. So I have high hopes for what's coming at MWC on that. The other thing that I think is, I mean, I don't know, but it makes sense that it would happen at MWC as well, is Nothing revealed that they are working on a phone 2A. Yeah. It's interesting that they're picking the A name like Pixel to make their mid-range phone, I guess.
Yeah.
I assume this is going to be a mid-range, right?
I figured so the Nothing Phone 1 released at a price point of, what was it, like $450 or something like that. And then the Nothing Phone 2 released at like $550. They upped it a little bit.
Yeah, they upped it.
So I feel like a lot of people really like the Nothing Phone 2. I love the Nothing Phone 2.
Oh my God, I love it too.
Like the price point is great. It's just cool. It's like a unique phone, and it performed very well. Like it was actually one of my favorites. But I think some people were a little bummed out about the price increase because they knew nothing from the Phone 1 as to be like kind of a more budget option. And so in my mind, I'm kind of thinking that the Nothing Phone 2A is almost just like a remake of the Phone 1.
I think it's going to be a little lower end than that because the Phone 1, I mean, I could be wrong, right? But the Phone 1 other than the chipset was flagship, essentially, right? Like the cameras,
the chipset was the one thing that I was like, oh man, like it didn't feel quite as snappy as I was hoping.
right? And and it had like, it had the metal frame. Like, I'm not sure we're gonna like. I would like to see them really maintain that teenage engineering design edge of the materials and everything, and hopefully they can pull it off. And I actually hope that it's actually more affordable than Phone 1. Well, let's see how it pans out. I have a feeling we're going to be pleasantly surprised. I have high hopes for nothing.
Yeah,
hopes for nothing. That's fun. Okay. The next thing is the TechnoSpark 20 Pro Plus. I've got a bunch of Techno phones here. I didn't get that one, but I'd love for you to tell us about it, because you did a couple of videos on your Instagram. I linked to it in the show notes. So tell us about this phone. What's the deal? What do you think? What you like, what you don't like, etc.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I've been very recently exposed to Chinese phones. And so this is one of the first, not the first, but one of the first. And man, like I said earlier, this thing's like $180, and it has OLED. It has 120 hertz. It has a 108 megapixel sensor, which at that price point might be a little gimmicky, but the camera is actually not bad. Like I was like if you compare its 108 megapixels to like the S20 Ultra when they first introduced that, it's not as good as that, but it's still taken some pretty solid photos. And like, I can just imagine, like in the US, if you release a phone for $180 and it has 120 hertz AMOLED, 108 megapixels, I'm like, that's crazy.
You lose your mind.
Yeah. So I haven't like actually put my SIM into it or anything to actually, fully test it or anything. But my first impressions are like, wow, for the price point, that is very impressive.
Yeah. So Techno is owned by a company that also owns Infinix. And they're based in Shenzhen, and they are actually kind of like partially owned by a French company that a bunch of ex-Alcatel people run, I think. Okay. And because Alcatel for a long time was a big phone manufacturer out of France. We're talking decades ago now, but back in the day when Siemens was making phone, when Ericsson was making phone, before they got blended into Sony and became Sony Ericsson. We're about to talk about some nostalgia here in a second, but I think the thing you need to, the takeaways, I think, for the audience is and I mentioned this before, but Infinix and Techno are both, gunning for markets like Africa, South America, India, Eastern Europe. And so the prices there are even more sensitive, right? And so, they're pushing the envelope. The biggest thing, my biggest gripe with the Techno phones and the Infinix phones in general has been, the software is kind of janky. It's kind of like Ray Magic, but at the same time, you're not going to get too many updates and stuff. But the spec sheet looks pretty solid, and the quality is there. Like, you take photos, it's decent. The displays are decent. The performance is decent. The battery, they usually have fast charging of some kind on their phones, etc. Right? So overall, I actually really enjoy the Infinix and Techno phones. So I was just excited to see you had covered one that I haven't gotten yet.
Yeah, I think it's also just as a content creator standpoint, it's fun to make videos on these types of phones because a lot of people aren't making videos about them. And they're also very interesting. They have like I did videos on Ulefone recently. That makes such good videos.
Oh, did you get the giant one? The one that's they sent it to me too. The one that the 22,000 milliamp hour battery.
I got it right here.
It's crazy. It's like a brick. It's like 2 pounds or something.
They had actually made a commercial, or not like an ad online of them running it over with a car to show that it was, very durable. And so I took that to the test and I ran it over with my car and it totally shattered. It's destroyed. It still works technically, but
wow. I got that thing and I was like, I don't have time for this until after MWC. I put it back in the box. Because it's like,
for me, it just makes great short form videos because they're just so
for you it's perfect. For you, it's absolutely perfect.
It's so interesting.
For me, it was more like I kind of dig the loud speaker that they have, like 80 decibel or whatever speaker, but I didn't realize that the battery was going to be so thick. Like, and I read the specs and I'm like 22,000 milliamp hour. That's a lot. But like in my mind, like I didn't equate that into what it would look like.
Oh, it's huge.
In my mind, it's
huge.
It's a brick. So yeah. Anyway, but you know what? Speaking of old brands, that I mentioned Alcatel just earlier and Siemens. Oh my God, that's like we're talking 20 years ago stuff here. When bar phones with numpads was still a thing at the high end. HMD Global, the company that acquired the Nokia brand for Android phones and that has been making all the Nokia branded phones in the last, 5 or I don't know, it's been probably like almost a decade now. I feel like it's 5 years, at least 5 years, probably more, but not quite 10 years. I have to look that up. They're dropping the Nokia brand. That's the end of an era. I'm like, how dare you? I mean, no, don't get me wrong. Like, here's the thing. HMD started off really good. They were like, we're going to be like, we've heard it loud and clear. You guys want Nokia phones that run Android. We're going to give for that. We're going to do that at the low end, at the mid range, and at the high end. And they did that. And then I don't know what happened, but they somehow stopped doing the high end and even the mid range and kind of focused on like this budgety. And unlike, the Chinese, even though HMD is manufactured in China, they're headquartered in Finland, but the value wasn't there. So even in the US, they tried to compete with Moto G and they got their lunch eaten, which is, if you're getting, beaten by a Moto G, you're in terms of like sales, I don't know, dude, there's something's wrong.
Yeah.
Especially when you have the Nokia brand behind you. They kind of squandered their lead there they had for a while there. The Nokia PureView 9 or whatever it was, the one with the 5 cameras or 6, whatever it was in the back. The idea was really cool, but then they kind of didn't execute properly and it wasn't good enough. But it was a flagship. And because the reviews are so bad, they decided to stop making flagships. This is totally not what you do. What you do is you double down and you do another product that's good. Yeah. Like, what were you thinking, Nokia or HMD?
So are they trying to continue making phones just without the Nokia branding, or are they just like done?
No, they're going to do phones that are going to be HMD branded. That's it. See, they're going to continue doing the same very, very yawny, very kind of boring, budgety phones, but with HMD instead of Nokia. Feel like I don't get it.
Yeah, I feel like if you're, making phones that aren't a great value and you have Nokia branding, I feel like that's the one thing that you have going for you that would actually get you some sales.
100%.
So to drop that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. But on top of that, it's Nokia. How do you want to, like, that is like, you're killing an iconic brand.
Yeah.
For what? Yeah. For nothing, right?
It reminds me of when Meta dropped the Oculus name.
Exactly.
Like, that was, iconic. And they're just like, yeah, never mind. We're not going to do that anymore.
I know.
I'm like, okay.
What? Yeah. The last thing that's a little sad is Bullet ceasing operations. Bullet manufactured the cat phones, which are like rugged, probably some of the best rugged phones I've ever used, to be honest. I mean, China makes a lot of rugged phones. There's Ukitel. There's a bunch of others that I've used over the years. Ulefone, exactly. That's another one. Actually, Ulefone are pretty good. I didn't dislike them as much as the Ukitels. The Ukitels are really janky in my opinion, but Bullet made the cat phones and they were great. They also made Moto rugged phones. Like they were able to license the Motorola brand to put on phones that they made that were rugged phones that were a little less like construction grade, but more like, I'm very clumsy and I want a decent phone and I don't want to put a case on it. So that, that's kind of like the market they went for. Kind of like Ulefone actually, because Ulefone, they're not as bulletproof as the cat phones, right?
Yeah.
And they went out of business. I know there was reports of them struggling for a while there, but this is it, which is kind of the end of an era. Like, I'm not going to lie, Parker, one of my top videos of all time on my YouTube channel is a Cat S21 review.
Really?
Yep. Wow. I don't know why. Still gets tons of views and numbers, and I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah.
But you know how YouTube is. It's weird. So.
Yeah, I've actually never had a chance to try out one of the cat phones, but it was one that I was like, ooh, I want to try that. Again, like these weird type of different phones always make good videos. So I'm like, I was like, ooh, I got to try that, but they're going to be gone.
That's the thing for me. Like a lot of my content includes Chinese phones because my audience is tech savvy early adopters. They kind of love the forbidden fruit. And not only that, it also gives you and me, the media and the people, the content creators, and our audiences, my audience, your audience, like a good taste of what the trends are, right? Like a lot of stuff that we see on the iPhone and Samsung phones today are things that Huawei started back in the day when they were at the top of the game. Like for a while there, like 5 years ago before the ban, Huawei was, you could not touch, and nobody could touch Huawei. Like they were so much more ahead of everyone else. It was indisputable. And they were defining a lot of things like, and then like even, Oppo, right? First periscope lens, Oppo, right? First in-display fingerprint sensor, Vivo. Like a lot of people don't know that. First, 65 or 67 watt charging with dual batteries, Oppo, right? Like a lot of what we take for granted in our Android phones today comes from the Chinese makers.
Yeah.
And so when you're covering something like the Realme 12 Pro Plus, even though that phone will never make it here, and yes, you can import it, but why would you? Because a year from now, there'll be another Realme 13 Pro Plus that's even better. Like this tells us where we're going. It shows us a really clear path as to what to expect, right?
Yeah.
And that to me is what's exciting. It's kind of like, you look at Chinese phones and you can predict the future. Like, oh, look. Oh, wow. Apple finally put a periscope lens on their freaking phone. How long has it taken them? Yeah. So that's what's cool about it. Listen, we should wrap up. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet? All your social media handles, of course. Tell them all about your YouTube and all that other stuff, TikTok.
Yeah. So my username on all of platforms, Instagram, Twitter /X, YouTube, TikTok is at I'm Parker Burton. So I am Parker Burton, or you just search Parker Burton and it'll pop up. So it's just my name and you'll find me.
And you're on all the platforms, right? Like YouTube, TikTok, Threads, Insta.
Yes.
Facebook? Are you on Facebook? I don't know.
I actually I did start Facebook a few weeks ago. I only have like 30 followers. It's not hitting the algorithm yet, but we're
and of
there.
Course, you said Twitter. Okay, cool. So yeah, pretty much everywhere. So folks, like go check out Parker's work. It's awesome. I love watching your stuff. It's also a lot of it is short videos, vertical videos. That's not a big investment. You just watch it for 30 seconds. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff, and get yourself some Parker in your lives. You know where to find me, guys. I'm at Tankgirl, that's TNKGRL, just like the comic book character. Drop all the vowels, and you get my handle for Twitter, for Blue Sky. I don't know why I still do that, but it's there. For Threads, I think Threads is really where I'm the most active right now. Instagram, of course. I don't do TikTok because I'm old and I'm confused by it, but I love it. I love the people who do it well. I admire them. I have YouTube, of course, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. You'll find some very rare videos there because it's maybe once a month at this point. I've just been really overwhelmed with other things. And but like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, comment on YouTube, comment about the podcast on YouTube if you want. And of course, the podcast itself is at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on all the major podcast apps, like Google, Apple, Pocket Casts, Spotify, all that. If you want to rate or review the show in your app, that would really help. And then, Patreon, I have a Patreon. You should check it out. Patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. You can get a video version of this podcast where you can see me and Parker. And it comes out usually a day or so ahead of the audio version. And it's one of the tiers. There's other stuff. There's a Discord server, other things. So check it out. Patreon.com/TNKGRL. And if you can help me out, that'd be great. If you want to help me out another way, there is a PayPal button in the show notes where all the links to all the stuff we talked about is, and you can click there and you'll buy me a coffee or something fun like that. Finally, I want to thank our sponsor, MediaTek. MediaTek, the world's 5th largest global fabless semiconductor company, powers more than 2 billion connected devices each year and is a market leader in developing innovative systems on chips, SoCs for mobile device, home entertainment, connectivity, automotive, and IoT products. And I want to thank you, Parker, for being my guest. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. I'm glad. We'll have you on at some point in the future. And folks, we'll have another show next week. So stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.